Hello everyone, this is Soma from Tranquil Canvas, and today I'm going to show you how to paint a yellow or sulfur crested cockatoo, which is an Australian native bird. My voice may sound a bit funny today because I do have a cold. It's not the dreaded corona, but yes, I'm not feeling the best today and I sound almost like a cockatoo. What you will need for today's workshop is a canvas. I'm using an 8 by 10 cotton stretched canvas, some sort of a surface for mixing up paints. So I've got a lid to use as palette, an assortment of flats and round brushes, and some acrylic paints. Now the colors that you're going to need for this tutorial is ultramarine blue. You can use any blue that you have, but I have used ultramarine blue, some magenta, a brown, a white or an off-white, and a Payne's gray or a black. I'll be using Payne's gray, a rag to clean your brushes, and a container for water. There is a template for this tutorial which I will be using to position the cockatoo and make sure that the composition of the painting just looks right. You're also going to need a chalk so that we can again work towards positioning the cockatoo in a way that looks good. So let's get started. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you're also going to need lemon yellow color for some parts of the bird. Alright, so step number 1 is to roughly divide the canvas into thirds, so 3 parts horizontally and then 3 parts vertically. You'll notice that the bottom section here is a little bit big, and that's okay. I'm just sort of going to position the trunk here. This grid helps you to position or compose your picture in a way that looks aesthetically nice. So the bird or the cockatoo would be roughly here, and the branch would be somewhere over there, right? So I'm just going to roughly put that branch there. Again, this is just a guideline, and don't worry about the chalk because you can paint over it or wipe it off with a paper towel. Then next step, we are going to take some colors on a palette and we're going to paint the background with the magenta. So you could just use the magenta as is, thin it down and layer coat. But what I'm going to do is have the magenta lighter at the top, so I'm going to mix that up with a little bit of white and then slightly darker at the bottom. So I'm just going to add a hint of blue, not too much. I don't want to turn it into a violet or a purple, but just a little bit of blue to have that little bit of darkness in the foreground. It'll just make the painting look nicer and make the bird look more prominent. It's going to emphasize the shape of the bird. Okay, so let me get my palette. So I'm going to use my large flat brush because I want to paint the background quickly, and my tip would be to pick up a proportionately large flat brush because it's just going to help you lay that coat quickly. So I've taken some magenta, and then just at the corner I've loaded the brush with some white, and then I'm just going to lay the colors in crisscross brush strokes. And then blend it left to right. And I'll continue to do that, making sure that I'm overlapping the next layer with the previous layer, just so that I can blend it to a smooth finish. Now if you want to make this lighter and you don't like the magenta to be so bright, you just come on top of it and lay some crisscross strokes with white and then blend it in. You need to do this while it's still wet, and don't forget to do the edges while you're at it, because it's just going to make the canvas look so much nicer when you hang it up on your wall. So yes, as you go and paint the background, make sure that you are painting those edges. I'm going to start adding just the pink as is, neat, with nothing else mixed in it, and then paint around that branch that I have drawn in with the chalk. Again, don't worry about the lines or the paint going into the chalk markings, because it's just chalk, and the acrylics, once dry, there's still room for you to make corrections. So don't worry too much about perfection. Acrylics are very forgiving. You can paint over mistakes. And as I come down, I'm just going to add a hint of blue, just a tiny little hint of blue, by loading the corner of the brush with a little bit of blue paint, and then blend that in with the pink. Now you don't need to do that, but as I said, I wanted to have somewhat of a darker foreground here, and then I'll just go and paint the edges. If you find that the paint is a bit too wishy-washy or ghostly, then all you need to do is lay another coat of the same colors that you would have just done in the first layer, and that will ensure that the canvas doesn't show through and you have a solid background layer. Because in this instance we need that layer to be nice and deep, because we're not going to be doing any more elements on top of it. Usually if I'm making a mixed media collage, the background can be super imperfect because we add other layers of maybe collage on it, maybe stencils, but in this case we're not going to do any of that. So make sure your background is nice and evenly covered with paint. We can continue the branch on the edges once we get started with coloring that branch, so don't need to worry about right now. Just going to blend that in with left and right horizontal strokes. Just get rid of that, smoothen that out. Just going to go ahead and add a little bit more white. Again, if you don't like your background to be too pink, feel free to change the color, but remember that our cockatoo is going to be white with orange and yellow color in it, and with hints of grays. So whatever color you choose for the background, just make sure that it will give the cockatoo a boost as a background. It will match the colors in the cockatoo. So I'm just using some white paint without mixing it up with any pink or magenta, because the magenta on my canvas is still wet, and I'm sort of happy with how that looks right now. So next step would be to paint in the branch with some brown. Now I'm just going to use the brown as is. I'm going to make sure it's nice and fluid. So if you are using paints that are really thick, make sure you thin it down with water, otherwise you're going to have difficulties getting good coverage on your canvas. The paint with lumps doesn't go smoothly onto the canvas. Alright, so my tip is to make sure that your paint is fluid, maybe not too runny, but definitely fluid, so you get good coverage onto your canvas. And notice that I am coloring in or painting in the branch with little strokes or small strokes. This actually helps later on to build in that texture of a branch which looks like a bark. So basically we are going to work on this wet on wet. I'm going to rinse my brush and then give it a good clean. And on the tip of the brush, I'm just going to load a little bit of white paint. And then on the top, I'm just going to add little broken lines with that white paint. And every time I see it fading, I'm going to go back and add some more. This is to show the highlights. Now again, at this stage, it doesn't need to be perfect, these marks, because we are going to make tweaks and changes once the bird has been painted in. Then we are going to clean the brush and take some blue and add it to the brown, and that's going to give you a darker brown. And that's for the bottom of the branch, to show some darker tonal values and shadows on the underside of the branch. And again, keep your brush stroke small, broken lines. I'm going to go a little bit outside the line that I have drawn, just so that I don't lose the main brown color in the center, because the idea is to create three tonal values: lighter color on the top, darker one at the bottom, and then the middle section stays as is. And that's going to give you a three-dimensional look. All right, now that's the background and the branch done, ready for our cockatoo to be perched on comfortably. So I'm going to let this dry and come back and show you how to position and draw the cockatoo on the canvas. Alright, for the next step, you are going to need a cutout of the cockatoo that you want to paint. I have attached something for you to download, so if you just want to use the one that I'm using, here's a template. Cut it out and then roughly position it on the branch however you have drawn it. The cockatoo just needs to be somewhat straight and not bang in the center, slightly off center-ish. Alright, and then all you need to do is make sure first that the claws are positioned roughly on the branch that you have drawn. Alright, roughly. Again, it may not be the perfect fit, but roughly on the branch that you have drawn. And then just draw in the outline to start with. I might actually, just to sort of maintain the posture, have another branch coming in from there. Now this is just me wanting to have that extra branch there, but if you have drawn a branch and which the cutout fits perfectly, that's up to you. But make sure you don't position it like so. It's not going to look as good, but look, even that posture, it could mean that the bird is just about to fly off, or the cockatoo is just going to fly off. So it's up to you. You could sort of have the cockatoo sitting up straight and have an extra branch drawn there, or you could do that. Yeah, so you have two options. Actually that might work, so I won't do that line. So yes, feel free to have a play and position the cockatoo in a way that works better for the branch that you would have drawn. Just make sure that it's not sitting bang in the center, and you place it slightly off center. And then all you need to do is draw the outline of the cockatoo first. Once you've drawn the outline, lift off the template and add in as many lines as you can for the details inside the profile of the cockatoo. Now, one thing I want to mention here, that within the cutout or the pattern that I have provided, there are some markings that give you some guidelines as to where you can add the shadows and the darker tonal values. So those are just a guideline. Feel free to change it in a way that's more suitable for what you are doing. I'm just going to go ahead and add these details. It's alright if you change things a little bit. It doesn't need to be exactly as in the Cockatoo, as in the template that I have provided. Just need a markup there. That's where I'm going to add the shadows and then the midtones here. So that's just a guideline for me to remember where to add the shadows. A bit of shadow there. Alright, I think we've got all the marks in there. Let me show you how that looks. Okay, for this next step you're going to need a little bit of well, plenty of white for the body of the Cockatoo, and then you're going to need the leftover blues, maybe a little bit pink, yellows for the crown of the Cockatoo, and perhaps a little bit of brown. All right, so apply first a base coat of white for the body of the Cockatoo. I'm going to take a flat brush to do that. Now don't worry if you can still see the pink areas underneath. That's just fine. This is just the base coat, and you will be sort of losing some of the markings you have made previously for the shadows inside the Cockatoo, but that's fine because those markings were just for guideline. The way we use them is we keep the paint coat a little bit thin and ghostly near where these markings are, and just make the other sections a bit darker and thicker in terms of paint consistency. So and then if you near any tricky areas, just swap to your round pointy brushes for any difficult or hard to reach areas. What I'm also going to do, I'm going to apply a little bit of white to the crown or the yellow section on the head of the Cockatoo. This will just make sure that the yellow color looks nice and bright. It doesn't need to be evenly painted. As you can see, it's just a very rough coat of a little bit of white. It's not a lot and it's not applied perfectly, but just a little bit. Then next what we're going to do is take a little bit of brown, add a little bit of blue to it, and then we're just going to apply that while the paint is still red on the areas where we want the shadows to be. So because the paint is wet, it's going to mix in with it and you're going to get a lighter version. Apply that as you see in the markings on the template within that shape, and then the edges, just dab the brush gently on top of it to soften the transition between the shadow and the rest of the feathers. Don't worry, because we're going to come back and apply more layers to brighten up the white, so don't try to get it all right in the first instance. And I'm going to apply this color wherever we have marked in the diagram. So somewhere over there. Now that's a bit too brown, so I'm going to add a bit more blue. We are aiming for a dark gray neutral color that's different from the brown in the branch. And then just let that blend with the white in the body of the cockatoo. I'll just take that little bit near the wings to show some shadows there. And then on this side, soften up the edges there. When I say soften up the edges, it basically means blending the area between the dark that we have just added and the white that we have painted. And the way to do that is just mix in the paint, dab the area, the transition area, the edge between the two colors, so that looks nice and soft. If you find that the paint has dried, just add a little bit more white and dab on that section. Get rid of the extra paint and blend it in. Then using the same color, I start making little C shapes around the neck just to give it a bit more structure there. And I'm going to add more white to that blue-gray color we had created previously. We have mixed up for the shadows, and then use that color to create these feather-like marks on the chest. We don't want to overdo it, so I'm just going to fade it off near that section and then use that to create some shadows here. These are just little dot shaped marks. And if you're wondering what's going to happen here, because those colors look really wishy-washy, don't worry about that. Once that's dry, we're going to come back in and add another layer, but for now we're just going to add these textures. Use the same color to add a little bit of marks around the eyes. Define the eyes a little bit. And then add some marks for the feather. So now I come back and add some pure white, making sure that the brush strokes are still little C's or marks to represent the little feathers or feathers of the cockatoo's chest. And I'll do the same thing here. Little C's or little U marks. Over here, little V-shaped marks. And then last, what we're going to do, not the last, we're going to mix up a dark blue-gray color, and that as the base coat for the beak. And then use that color from the feathers on the top. Make sure you sort of blend the transition between the two colors by just tapping the brush on the edge where the colors meet. Add a hint of that bright color at the junction where the upper beak and the lower beak meet, so that line between the two beaks, the upper and the lower beak, is clear. A little bit of highlight there. Color in the eyes. Using the same dark color that we used for the beak. And then a little bit of white dot. Now the center of the eye there is going to be black. We'll just come back to it once we finish the yellow crest. So for the yellow section there, you're going to need some lemon yellow, or if you have cadmium yellow, that should work fine too. And then all you need to do is fill in that section with yellow, like so. All the way down. Alright, then the base of the yellow, you're going to take a little bit of the brown, just tiny little bit of the brown, and then just blend that in on one side, on this side, the bottom side. Just a little bit at the bottom edge, not too much. Alright, and then if you're going to do, oh, we forgot the tail. Let's complete the tail. So we should have done that with the body, but I forgot. So we do the same thing that we did with the body of the cockatoo. We're just going to paint a base coat of white. Now I have some leftover yellow on my brush, and that's all right. You'll see in a minute why. So same thing that we did previously, we're just going to take some of that blue gray color, and following the shadows pattern that we saw, we're going to just apply that to create some shadows like so. Literally we just paint it as you see in the diagram. So you press the brush and flick it downwards to make it look like feathers, or give it more feather-like appearance. It's as simple as that. And then I'm going to take some of the dark color from the beak and press the brush here and flick it upwards. Do that a couple of times, and we don't want it to be too dark and obtrusive, just something to look like feathers. Alright, so keep it light, and they're all sort of converging up there. And then I'm just going to take some of that color and add a little bit there. Alright, now let's clean the brush. Make sure that the water is clean, because by this stage the water would be murky, and the reason is we are going to go back into the body of the cockatoo here and paint some yellows in there, just so that all the colors in there look cohesive, and you need a clean brush for that. So we don't want a lot of yellow. I've taken some yellow on the tip of a flat brush, and I'm going to dab the excess onto my palette, and then I'm just going to, on the side where there's no dark, I'm just going to add in a little bit of yellow, not too much, just a little bit, and a little bit here. Now this just adds a little bit of brightness, and some over here. And then I'm going to take some white paint, same thing, dab off the excess. So dab off the excess on the palette, and then just create some more little feather-like marks using that white paint there. And this will ensure that the cockatoo now starts looking really three-dimensional. Let the brush strokes overlap the previous layers a little bit here and there. The intermittent overlapping of the brush strokes is what's going to give your painting a three-dimensional appearance. Alright, I'm quite happy with that. maybe a little bit of yellow there too, just a little hint here and there, maybe a little bit of yellow there, just subtle hints, not too much. Right, now to finish off, what I'm going to do is first thing, I noticed that this section there is a bit too red, so I'm just going to come on top of it with a bit of brown darkened by the blue, and just dry brush the top of the branch to subdue that bright brown color. There, that looks much less brighter. We don't want anything to start competing, so I'm again overlapping the brush strokes with the previous layer there, and that sort of creates a textured appearance. Right, so next we're just going to use some paints gray or black for the claws and a little bit of, pardon me, detail for the eyes. Alright, so to paint in the claws, you're going to need a very fine brush, either a detail brush or a liner brush, and just add a bit of darkness near that white section there, and then paint in the claws. I'm also going to add a hint of Payne's Grey in the beak. And a little bit there. And some little bit of white on top of claws, just to have some tonal value there. Doesn't need to be a lot. Blend that in so it's not too stark, and then mix some of that Payne's Grey with a brown. Get a very dark brown color, and that's sort of going to be the darker contrast for the branch. This is the opportunity to cover up any section that wasn't covered up when we did the base coat. Right, and again remember, we are just doing little broken strokes. It's not meant to be a straight line because that just won't look right. Little broken strokes to show or indicate the bark of the tree. Now the next thing, and this is totally optional, is to create some shapes or silhouettes of vegetation in the background. Now this is only for those who feel maybe that the background looks very flat. So the way to do that is roughly have some shapes that you draw in, and then those shapes you fill in with a dark purple color. So let me just show you how. I'm going to maybe have a shape of a Banksia here. Right. So this is a good opportunity for me to also sort of get rid of that shape there that I had made for a branch. So just some skinny leaves. Banksia leaves are very slender and skinny, so I'm just going to make some leaves there. Right, and maybe another one here. And some leaves coming up here. Skinny leaves. Banksia leaves are very skinny. And then all we do is mix up some of that pink that we had used for the background with a hint of the ultramarine blue, and that will give you a blue violet pink. And then all you need to do is paint in that shape the silhouette with this color. Alright, and that's the cockatoo done. A yellow sulfur crested cockatoo, a gorgeous Australian native bird with some Banksias in the background.